Either you are somebody who suffers from an addiction or you're somebody who is on the receiving end of addictions. It's something that is really misunderstood, and it's something that's so important because it impacts our lives so hugely. And I want to enter into a nice discussion around somebody who's got an addiction and how to deal with it. Also your choices as an individual who's with somebody who has an addiction in their lives. So if we look at what is an addiction, many people just think, can't they just have more willpower? Can't they just snap out of it and just change? But it's so much more complex than that. It actually starts impacting your brain, your physiological brain gets impacted. And it's not just a case of being able to switch on and off your willpower. It affects your emotional well-being, and it becomes almost impossible to get out of these destructive behaviors and patterns that have persisted for such a long time. According to the official DSM classification of addiction, it's referred to as substance-related and addictive disorders. And it includes addictions such as alcohol, opioids, and any sort of stimulants. But also very interesting, more recently they've started putting in things like gambling. So it's not only a chemical, it's a behavior. And now we start getting to the heart of what an addiction really is. The key characteristic of an addiction is that you have the inability to control it, despite the fact that it has a negative impact on health, responsibilities, and your relationships. So an addiction begins with a voluntary action. Either you're seeking some form of pleasure, or you're looking for an escape, or just some relief of some situation. Whether you're going through some traumatic event, you've had a stressful day at work, you've had problems with the children, whatever your circumstances. But what starts happening over continuous repetition, your brain starts getting hijacked. The need for the substance or this behavior intensifies, and you start wanting to have more and more. And then you start finding that the natural reward, such as a relationship or any other benefit, starts losing its significance, and you start becoming almost obsessed with the chemical or the behavior. And then you start entering the cycle of absolute depletion, where you start craving it, you start having an emotional dependency upon it, and as a result of that, you start experiencing distress. But you have this increasing sense of powerlessness, as though you cannot control it. Although many of us may be in denial and thinking, I can be in control. It's only a temporary situation. If I really wanted to, I could quit it. We don't actually admit that it's been destructive, even though the relationships around us are falling apart, even though the people that we love are being so impacted by it. But yet we persist. We continue with the destructive behavior or destructive use of the chemical. But I want to go deeper. What really is an addiction? It's a response to pain. Either you're consciously aware that you have some pain, or it's so deep-seated in your unconscious that you're not even aware. Or you know that when you're doing this, it gives you a great sense of pleasure. You don't even know that there's some hidden traumas. So an addiction is a solution to the pain. So either it gives you temporary relief, or you feel a great sense of pleasure, but it's only short-term and it's not long-term. And it creates harm and wreaks havoc in your life and has negative consequences. That's what an addiction does. And yet, you have the inability to give it up, even though you can see and observe that it's having harmful effects around you. And we often just don't want to accept and admit that we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing it. Because why should you? After all, it's a great solution. It's providing you great pleasure, great relief, great escape. But more often than not, it's the people around us that are impacted by our addictions. And we don't like to admit it. We don't like to own up when we are the ones who are causing them harm and hurting them. It's not really intentional. It's serving a purpose for you. So let's look at romantic relationships. Some individuals are so hooked on that euphoria of meeting somebody new. And after 6 or 7 months, the feeling dies and they start thinking, maybe this is not the person for me. And then they repeat the cycle. They start looking for a new romantic partner and get so excited and think, yes, this is the one. And after a few months, the feeling just fizzles out. They're actually addicted to that falling in love phase. They're addicted to that honeymoon phase. But let's look at the consequences of that behavior. It's causing hurt. It's damaging relationships. It's hurting people around you. And you also land up moving from one relationship to another relationship where it's only shallow, not deep, meaningful connection. Not a great sense of belonging because it's only temporary. I'd just like to hear in the comments if any of you are experiencing a situation where either you suffer from addiction, and please, I'd like to hear from you. I'll respond to each and every comment. So put in the comments, let me hear what sort of addictions you're experiencing, or if you're on the receiving end of somebody who has an addictive behavior. I personally have observed how addictions tear families apart. We can't change individuals. If individuals want to pursue that life, it's their journey, it's their path. But it hurts and it destroys. And it's exceptionally painful if you're on the receiving end of somebody who has an addiction. So the first step in addressing any addiction is to know that it's not a moral failing. Know that it's much deeper than that. It's a deep sense of discomfort with oneself. And you start seeking relief from that. You may not be aware of it, but this stems from many years of ingraining and forming the identity of who you are. Denial keeps us trapped in the cycle of self-destruction, or maybe even destruction of people around us, destroying families, hurting people. That self-awareness is a gateway to change. That's the first step that you need to take, is to start becoming aware, move out of the denial and accepting. But sometimes it's so hard, it's so difficult to just acknowledge that maybe we're the cause of people hurting around us. But once you start accepting and becoming aware of the impact it's having, then you can start moving towards what behaviors and what things you can do to change it. And that really means reshaping and reforming your identity. If you don't do this now and you just stop the behaviors through great willpower, through great support, through great workshops, you're simply going to replace one addiction with another unless you get to the root cause of it. The question is, why are you having the pain in the first place? What is important, and what my experience has been, is identifying what the need is. I'm just going to share a personal story with you. I ended up enjoying my glass of wine. I thoroughly enjoyed my glass of wine. And I used to think, it gives me great pleasure. I don't do anything wrong. I work a hard day's work, and I used to enjoy the occasional glass of wine. The only issue is that I realized it started changing my behavior. Now, whenever I had that glass of wine, I started noticing it dropped my inhibitions, and whatever underlying feeling I had, it would exacerbate it. So if I was exceptionally happy about something and I had the glass of wine, well, I'd be ecstatic. Also noticed if I was angry or upset about something, that would just be exacerbated and exaggerated. And I'd just spit out and lash out people around me. And one day my son said to me, "I don't like the person you are when you drink." And that hit hard. I thought, I don't have a problem with alcohol. I've never drank more than one glass. But I realized that that one glass was harmful. Just one glass. My behavior was impacting my son. And that was a wake-up call. What was the underlying issue? Why was I needing that one glass of wine? Despite the fact that my son was unhappy, it made me feel awful, especially going through menopause. It brought out hot flashes. I had sleepless nights. But yet I persisted. And that's when I realized, what would life look like if I quit? Even that 1 or 2 glasses of wine would give me far more energy. I would not have the sleepless nights, because I started finding out with 1 glass of alcohol, it would put me to sleep. But then I'd wake up 2-3 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't go back to sleep. And I know at that stage, I could have rationalized it and I could have said, there's nothing wrong. What's 1 glass of wine? And having observed a lot of alcoholics amongst families and friends and seeing what it's done to personal lives, I realized I didn't want to go down that path. And I had to stand back and look at what were the triggers. For me, I had to realize I was trying to escape stress. And I was looking for an outlet. And it started giving me temporary pleasure and relief from the stress that I experienced in the day, until I started replacing that with more healthier habits. But I must say, addiction thrives in isolation. It does require somebody else close to in your life to alert you, to awaken you to the fact that it is impacting people negatively around you. But if you want to address addiction, you've got to get to the root cause. And most of the time, it's embroiled in the pain that I've mentioned. And we need to identify where that pain originates from and how we can find better ways to self-soothe than the addictive behaviors or the addictive substances that we take. Many people who suffer from addictions, we know that the underlying cause is either some form of anxiety, some sort of a trauma that they've experienced in their earlier life, or even a depression. And what is depression? Well, if you look at the word depress, it comes as a result of always having to suppress your feelings. So unless we can actually feel the feelings that we need to feel, we're going to be in that state of depression, and then our addiction starts helping us overcome the depression that we're in the first place. So if you don't address the core issues, it's more likely that you're going to have a relapse. Cognitive behavioral therapy really has a good place in terms of addiction, but we also see the support groups in terms of AA as an example. Those are the ones that have meaningful, long-lasting change. Or even having holistic approach. What I mean by holistic approach, That means by looking at your diet, looking at your lifestyle, looking at your mental well-being, looking at your family, your support, your friends. I just want to spend a few moments just talking about people who are impacted with those who have an addiction. And it's exceptionally hard, especially if it's somebody close to you that you love dearly. It is so difficult to watch them destroy their lives, and you know that the addiction is unhealthy. You know it's destructive, and you know that they can't give it up. So what are your options? What can you do? Well, there's three kind of scenarios that can play itself out. The one scenario is you can turn around and say to the individual, look, I love you so much, and I'm not going to judge you. And I know that the decision is your decision. All I can do is accept that this is who you are and love you and be here to support you. But this is very hard. That means you can't fight with them. You can't actually start begging them and nagging them. You need to let them be if you take that stance. And it's not an easy option because you know the impact it's having on you. But it's a personal choice. If that's what you decide to do, it's up to you. Second option is to say, look, I'm not judging you. I know that this comes out of some sort of experience you've had, some sort of a pain, but the impact it's having on me is just too much. I can't handle the impact it's having on me. So I'm going to leave the relationship and I'm going to love you for a distance. But you do it in the most loving possible way that you can. And you also have the right to make those decisions. The third option, the third scenario is you're going to stay in the relationship and you're going to do whatever you can do to help them change. Now, this is absolutely insane. It is so hard for us as individuals to change ourselves, let alone for somebody else to change. Truth is, nobody will change unless they want to change. There's nothing you can do and accept that that's the reality. And sometimes the reality is people have to reach rock bottom before they will ever change, if they will change. But change is also hard because it means you've got to let go of your past, because we end up going back to what we're familiar with. And that's what we're most comfortable because it's shaped our identity and that's how we've behaved and it's been ingrained to however old we are. So if you want to change, number one is you've got to let go of your past. You've got to let go of those harmful behaviors that have defined who you are and have become so habitual in the way you live. And you have to carve out a new identity for yourself and keep that as your aspiration, your inspiration, and continuously reinforce and work towards achieving that goal of becoming that person. If you don't let go of your past, it's not going to ever let you truly live. Second point to set us free is sometimes we really have to hit rock bottom. And you may have heard the expression, the quote, that an alcoholic will only stop once he's lost everything. Well, there is another option, and I'm hoping people will want to change instead of hitting rock bottom. But pain changes us. Sometimes the pain of remaining the same is so painful that the pain of change is more desirable. And the third point that will set you free is you have to be vulnerable. You have to do the work. You have to do the introspection and understand where your pain originates. Where does it come from? Even if it's unconscious. And we become vulnerable with people around us. So to have that support, to have a supportive partner or friends or family or somebody who's there for you, that you know you can be truly vulnerable and you're going to be safe. That's the biggest gift anybody can receive, to know that they're loved unconditionally. Then to change yourself is going to require consistency. It's going to require a lot of effort, new behaviors, and you're going to have to continuously reinforce it over and over. Sometimes we slip back into our old behaviors, and that's when it's wonderful to have a support, either a support group or to have somebody that's close by that loves you. We do need support, especially when it comes to addiction. If you're in isolation, it's more difficult to break. And that support comes in loving, caring people who don't judge us and are there to support us and encourage us. Meaningful social connections help us with the change. When we know we have people who love us unconditionally, who don't judge us and are there to help us when we slip back. And if we do slip back, we have some sort of a support from a family member, a partner, somebody who loves us unconditionally. Setbacks are going to happen, but it does require us to have self-compassion, to have patience with ourselves, and very important, persistence. So to anyone out there who's suffering addiction or being impacted by addiction, know that you're not alone. Many of us are fighting addictions or fighting the impact of addictions because it's often a taboo subject. It's something we feel ashamed of. We're the biggest critics of ourselves. Understand what addiction's about. Find out. Do self-reflection as opposed to blame, and express unconditional love for yourself or those suffering around you from an addiction. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.